Hi, everyone. I am Lisa Kramer. I'm RISD's Fulbright Program Advisor. And with me tonight, we have Alex McGarger, who received his RISD Bachelor of Architecture and a Fulbright to Austria. Hi, Alex. And we have Gail Foreman, who received her RISD BFA in Glass in 2014 and a Fulbright to Brazil. Hello, Gail. Thank you both so much for joining us. And I just have to tell everyone that it is 1 a.m. for Alex right now, who is in Vienna. So thank you. And Gail actually changed a flight to join us, to be with us tonight. So thank you both for being here, really. Thank you. We also have Ellen Tracy with us tonight, our RISD Careers Communication and Programs Manager, who is also a fantastic RISD Fulbright interviewer. So tonight, I'm first going to play a video tutorial on all things Fulbright. I have recorded this in advance to streamline all the information, and so you all this core information all in one place. This video actually is from 2021 because Fulbright 2022 actually doesn't start until April. So in April, I'll update this tutorial again, but do know that there's usually only minor changes. The heart of Fulbright that you're going to hear tonight in this presentation is not going to change. After the video, we're going to hear from Gail and Alex, and then we're going to have an open Q&A discussion, and we really hope you stick around. A lot of times you learn a lot from just hearing other people's questions. So let's go to the video.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm Lisa Kramer. I'm RISD's Fulbright Program Advisor, or FPA. Fulbright is an intense process. My job is to make it more exciting rather than overwhelming, and to help you understand the process and missions you can learn and grow from each step. I'm here to help you at all stages of the application cycle, pull all the pieces together into a compelling proposal, no matter your discipline or project content. Fulbright is also a long process. To briefly outline the timeline, you will start working on this in the winter or spring, maybe even earlier. Things will intensify during the summer as you pull all the pieces together. You will submit early fall, then the following spring, you are notified of the decision. Grants begin late summer or fall, a year after you submitted, or even the winter or the next year for some countries. Once you start the application process, the grant is a good year away. So if you're intending to apply this year, great. Consider that you will need to set time aside for Fulbright between spring and through September. If you are interested in next year or the year after, also great. It's never too early to start thinking about a Fulbright grant. Some can pull this off in 5 to 6 months, but many take 1 to 2 years to develop their proposal. In any case, you are here now and will learn a great deal, no matter how far you go in the Fulbright exploration. So about Fulbright, the goal is to increase mutual understanding between the people of the U.S. and the people of other countries through exchange. It was created by Congress in 1946 to promote international goodwill through the exchange of students in the fields of education, culture, and science. It is funded through U.S. Congress. It is administered in the U.S. by the Institute of International Education, IIE, and it is administered overseas by binational commissions and U.S. embassies. This is a government grant, which you should keep in mind as you consider your audience. It is also very important that you always keep in mind that Fulbright is, at heart, about meaningful cross-cultural exchange. The grant is open to graduating seniors. You may begin the application process in your junior year, but you won't be able to submit an application until the fall of the senior year. Graduate students and recent graduates know that you can apply through RISD up to 3 years after graduation. You must be a U.S. citizen by the application deadline, have a bachelor's degree by the start of the grant, be proficient in the language of the host country, and have limited experience in the host country. For most programs, applicants who have had extensive recent experience in the host country or extensive foreign experience may be at a competitive disadvantage, but are still eligible to apply. Plus, there are country-specific requirements you will need to familiarize yourself with. Know that diversity and inclusion are cornerstone principles of Fulbright. Fulbright's goal is to have a program that represents the diversity that makes up the U.S. There are 2 main grants: the Study Research Grant, which is independent research, study, or arts projects abroad for 8 to 10 months, offered in 140 countries. English teaching assistantships are an opportunity for you to help teach English and use culture in your classrooms for 8 to 10 months, offered in 75 countries. I'm going to focus on the Study Research Grant, as that is what most RISD students are interested in. But no, we are happy to help you with an ETA application too. Keep in mind, though, that the ETA opportunity comes with the expectation that you have experience in teaching, experience in working with non-native English speakers, specific teaching ideas and methods, and can make clear connections as to why teaching English will support your long-term goals. So a little more on the study research grant in the creative arts. You will need a well-developed project and/or study plan that, in Fulbright's words, improves your craft, which means art and design making needs to be central in the study, research, and outcomes. You need to develop and document a host country affiliation relationship. This might be with a university, research think tank, lab, library, community organization, or nonprofit, in which you receive mentorship and critique, maybe access to facilities or equipment. Perhaps you are taking a class or workshops, plus you could be supporting their research or class or assisting in a production or conference. You will also need a compelling visual portfolio that supports the grant activities. Consider that your portfolio will be reviewed by U.S. artists and designers and host country experts who are likely not all artists and designers. You will need to include meaningful host country community engagement and have a high level of academic, professional, and/or artistic achievement, and demonstrated leadership, flexibility, adaptability, and openness. There's an additional program called the Fulbright National Geographic Storytelling Fellowship. This is really exciting, but it is a little tricky. It is supplemental to the study research grant. Supplemental meaning only if you receive the study research grant will you be considered for the National Geographic Storytelling Fellowship, which means your study research project must be first and foremost. Your National Geographic proposed project cannot distract from your study research project. Your study research project must stand alone with the National Geographic Storytelling Fellowship as a possible enhancement. If you are interested in adding this to your Fulbright application, you will include additional application components: a storytelling project proposal, a storytelling portfolio, and a storytelling portfolio narrative. While all applicants of all disciplines are welcome, know that they are looking for academic storytellers who can tell research-based stories. You have to have demonstrated experience in storytelling, and it is incredibly competitive. If you're seriously interested and it makes sense for you in your work, you will need to carefully review all the details of this program. What are the award benefits? Round-trip airfare, a monthly stipend, accident and sickness benefits, and other possible benefits depending on the host country. Once you return from a Fulbright experience, you will have gained new perspectives, skills, and insights that will influence you for the rest of your life, along with Fulbright being a great network builder and resume builder. One of the most common questions that is asked about benefits is, can I defer my loans while I'm on a Fulbright grant for a year? And the answer is yes. What does a Fulbright project look like? It is so hard to define. There are so many variables, from your skills and interests to your affiliate's area of expertise, and there are 140 countries, each with their own interests and requirements. The possibilities are endless, but there are basically 3 broad types with lots of gray area in between. Independent study research is the traditional Fulbright award in which you design a project from beginning to end that allows you to work with people of the host country to mutually advance in your field of interest. Some countries offer graduate enrollment as an option. In this case, the program, activities, and outcomes are set. It's graduate study. However, this can be tricky as you still have to make a strong case for this isn't just about funding for graduate study. Why is this a Fulbright? What is a meaningful cross-cultural exchange? Why this country? How is this something that you can't do in the U.S.? It is important that you make a case for how your exploration goes beyond the institution of graduate study. And for most countries, you also have to be accepted to the university program, usually a separate process. This is what most RISD Fulbrighters do, hybrids. Most have some connection to a university, academy, or institution in which there is some structured class or workshop learning, plus some sort of independent mission, earning, learning, question, exploration. Usually, to do this effectively, RISD applicants have secondary affiliates, which gets them out into the community exploring, practicing, and applying their skills and learning. Let's move on to the Fulbright Resources. The Fulbright website is extensive. Everything you need is there. But because there's so much to navigate, I'm going to give you a tour and highlight the most important pages for you to review to get started. First, be sure you're on the Fulbright U.S. Student Program website, not the Fulbright Scholars website or a host country's Fulbright website. Make sure it says U.S. Student at the top. Probably the most exciting pages are the country information and requirements found here by region. For example, let's look at Romania. Here you will find the award profile and grant period. If there's anything in particular they are looking for in candidates, such as discipline, area of focus, or degree levels, Of course, you'll want to check out the language requirement right away. Any restrictions or preferences on affiliation will be listed on this page. And you may also find a link to the host country website or an email to an actual human. Process information is found under the Applicants tab, Application Components. Choose the grant, Creative and Performing Arts. Here you will find each application component with drop-downs that include considerable details on instructions and tips. Visual material requirements are found under Supplemental Materials. The visual materials are not supplementary, they are required and they are very important. Click on the link to Required Materials. You will get a list of the Fulbright disciplines with drop-downs to the requirements for each. You will have to choose a discipline. There is no multidiscipline option. It's not that you can't have a multidisciplinary practice or project, because there are so many applicants, they have to put you in categories. So you will have to choose what best fits your project and consider your audience. The link to the online application, which opens in early April, is found here. Fulbright offers webinars April through October. Under the Applicants tab, under Information Sessions, you will find webinars for applicants. These are one-hour sessions in which you will hear from Fulbright experts and hear questions from your peers around the country. It is important that you listen to a couple of these. I listen to at least 20 every year and learn a little something new each time. It is also important that you hear from Fulbright directly to confirm what I'm telling you and to provide you with new perspectives. If you see one you are really interested in but miss it, make note, then go to Recorded Webinars to listen in. You will also find webinars from the previous year here. I am often an applicant's first go-to, but know that Fulbright program officers who work for IIE are there to help too. Sometimes I don't know the country-specific answer. There are 140 countries, so it'll be best for you to email or call the program directors directly. Their contact information can be found by going to Contacts in tiny white font at the bottom of the page. Also in tiny white font at the bottom, you will find a link to a page of interesting statistics. You will find application and awards for each country. I did the math here, and in 2020-2021, 35.7% of the study research projects were awarded in the Czech Republic and 20% in Denmark. By no means should statistics solely guide your choice. If you are passionate about a country and your project is a great fit for that country, don't look at the statistics. But if you are open, the statistics may help you make a decision. You may want to poke around in the statistics and consider a less competitive country. Obviously, English-speaking countries are more competitive. The UK is by far the most competitive. If you speak another language, consider how that might be an advantage. And if you speak French, maybe instead of French, which is quite competitive, consider Benin, Morocco, or Burkina Faso. And if you don't speak another language, consider a country like Latvia or Norway with no language requirement, or Laos or Malaysia that have a more flexible language requirement. Learning some of the language is still important to these countries, but because their language is not commonly taught in the US, they are more flexible. Also in statistics, you will find a link to the top producing institutions. RISD students and alumni do very well in this competition, and RISD is a top producing school in the specialized institution category, with 89 awardees who have explored their creative projects in 43 different countries. Under the Alumni tab, you will find a grantee directory with Fulbright alumni across the country in all disciplines. I did a search on sculpture and India, which resulted in 13 Fulbrighters. There's not a lot of information on each Fulbrighter here, but the directory may give you some project idea leads or help you determine the country's interests, and maybe even lead you to someone to contact. Fulbrighters are often happy to talk to applicants about their experience. But when looking for Fulbright artists for inspiration or support, I suggest you start at the RISD's Career Center website. Scroll down to learn more about Fulbright and then to the RISD Fulbright Showcase. You will get a site of RISD Fulbrighters. Over 35 are on the site. In stories, you can read about their projects and you can connect with them through their website or see what they are up to on their Instagram. In the Experience Gallery, you can see some great photos of their lives and the people they worked with while on the Fulbright grant. And in the Artwork Gallery, you can see both what they submitted to receive the grant and the results of their projects. This website is a great place to go for inspiration and make connections. But for the nitty-gritty, how does this actually happen for RISD students? Go back to the Fulbright section on the RISD Career Center website. There are two very important documents to guide your process: the checklist and deadlines, and getting started. First, though, consider, will you be applying through RISD? If enrolled or an alum who graduated in the past 3 years, you have the option to apply through RISD, but you are welcome to apply on your own, which Fulbright calls at large, and it is not seen as a disadvantage by Fulbright in any way. Know that the pro to applying through RISD is you'll receive intensive support throughout the process, but the con may be you must follow RISD's internal deadlines. We require you to submit in mid-August in order to receive feedback, have time for fine-tuning, and resubmit. Fulbright's national deadline is early October. Our internal deadlines are in place so we can effectively, efficiently, and fairly support all of you through the process, but they are also in place for your benefit. We know from past experience that applicants who start late really struggle and then decide to wait until next year, which is fine. Lots of applicants have false starts and come back stronger than next year. This is RISD's checklist and deadline, which you saw earlier. This is just the first page of this document, a visual look at the deadlines. This document goes on to provide additional milestones for each application component. This document will help guide your process. Be sure to check out this document on the website for the exact dates, but know that the first deadline is a Kickstart meeting in mid to late May, where you confirm your intent and country choice, and we ensure you are ready to go. The second deadline is your first draft, due early June. And the first submit, if you're applying through RISD, is mid-August. Keep in mind, summer can be very challenging. Consider that many countries have a culture of long holidays in the summer, and holiday means a real break. You may find that affiliate contacts are not available, particularly mid-July to early September. And we strongly encourage you to submit documents before the deadlines. This will provide you with early reviews, meaning more time to redraft, incorporate feedback, fine-tune, and move on to your next draft or another application component. The second important document is the RISD Getting Started. This is the index page of that document. The first thing you'll notice is that it's really long, but consider that this is a condensed version of everything for RISD artists and designers in one place, with guidance based on our experience with working with many applicants over the years. This is your resource. Take the time to read this over once now, and then use it as a reference throughout the process. The RISD Getting Started document walks you through each application component with detailed advice. Plus, it has valuable information on how to work with me, what makes you a strong candidate, and what makes a competitive proposal. So what are the components? Affiliation. Applicants must find and arrange their affiliations. Countries have specific requirements, but it's usually with a university, nonprofit, or research think tank. It cannot be with a for-profit company. Applicants must build the relationship and then document the nature of the relationship in a letter. Yes, this can be hard and take time, so start early. Just do it. Don't wait for the perfect draft or perfect project idea. Who your affiliate is, what they can offer, what they would like in return will affect your project ideas and proposal. You want to work with your affiliate to develop your project. There are tips in the Getting Started document to help your search and develop your affiliation. We also have an email outreach template and actual affiliate letters we can review with you during advising appointments. Statement of grant purpose. This is a 2-page proposal outlining all the details and purpose of your project. There are a number of tools to get you started on project development and writing. In the RISD Getting Started document, under the application component, Statement of Grant Purpose, you can find these prompts to ensure you hit key content. This is, in a sense, a way to interview yourself. You can use these prompts as headers to help you focus, and then as your drafts develop, you'll delete. In fact, I often use them as a checklist when I review your first draft. Do consider that less is more. One thoughtful idea will be more effective than many. The purpose statement needs to be a clear and straightforward plan. You need a focused, unique direction to get busy reviewers on board. Personal statement. You have a 1-page to talk about your path. How did you get to this point of applying for a Fulbright? This is where you can be more creative and show some personality. It could be anything, really. It is an introduction to you. Obviously, nothing too personal. Remember, this is a government grant, and it should be directly related to your project. Think of this as a 3rd page in connection to your purpose statement. This is a great place for critical reflection. Fulbright loves critical reflection and seeing that you have an awareness of your arc of growth. What did you try, learn, then realize, and how did that change your perspective, lead you to new questions and next steps? This is also a place for examples and stories rather than a listing like a resume. Deep reflection of one story in your path is better than a list. For both the purpose and personal statement, consider in the Getting Started document the section on what makes a competitive proposal. For each of these green bullets, you will find a detailed description of what Fulbright is looking for. Read this now at the beginning and keep referring back to it as you develop your proposal. In addition, consider asking yourself the two big important questions. First, why this country? Beyond the institution you'll be working with, if you picked up this project for Singapore and moved it to Japan, is it the same thing? How is it unique to Singapore? Second, how will this experience improve your craft? Beyond inspiration or a new place to practice, what skills are you gaining to specifically improve your craft in this country? Language forms. Depending on the country, a language self-evaluation and a professional evaluation may be required or recommended. 3 recommendation letters are required. Choose wisely in terms of who will write a meaningful letter and who will be timely. At the application stage, unofficial transcripts are required. So you'll need to collect these documents, scan them neatly, and upload them into the application. The online application is really long and includes 5 to 6 additional essays. Start this early. This is not a last-minute thing. And be neat and consistent in both content and in formatting. You want to have a strong application package from beginning to end. And finally, visual materials. I have this last, not because it isn't important. It is. It's extremely important. But you are the experts on this. You know how to do this well. I won't get into a lot of detail in this tutorial, but consider a few critically important tips. Connect your images to your grant project. Curate the order thoughtfully. Consider your audience carefully. Your reviewers are not only artists. Take advantage of the image descriptions. Tell your reviewers, especially your non-art reviewers, more about your process and ways of thinking. I highly recommend you check out the Fulbright Arts Portfolio webinar found on Fulbright's recorded webinars page. The final weeks can be fairly intense, so I'm going to walk you through the submission steps. If you are applying through RISD, you submit the complete application through the Fulbright online system by mid-August. But I see it first. Fulbright is not looking at this point. I arranged your RISD Fulbright interview. And don't worry, the interview is more fun than it is scary, and it can be very helpful. Know that RISD is not a gatekeeper. We submit all applications. The interview's purpose is to ensure that you're prepared to carry out your proposed project and provide an opportunity for you to receive additional feedback. After your interview, I unsubmit your application and you have a last chance for fine-tuning. This is the time for minor changes, not rewriting. Redeveloping after months of work doesn't usually work out well. This is a time to make careful, select changes to strengthen. Then you resubmit. Again, your submission goes to RISD to me for a quick review to catch any errors. I then hit my submit button to Fulbright and it's done. Art applications are first reviewed in the U.S. by experts by discipline, and semifinalist decisions are announced in January. Semifinalist applications then go to the host country for review. And then host countries make their decisions. Both governments approve, and finalists are announced anytime between February and May, usually in March or April. I've given you a lot of information and resources here, but how do you get started? Grant writing is just as much about organization skills as it is project development. Developing organizational tools based on your style to keep track of your research, drafts, and affiliate outreach, and set personal milestones to help you meet these deadlines. Review the country summary pages, which is really exciting and is important to find out early on if there are restrictions, preferences, or special requirements. Start drafting your purpose and personal statements earlier. The first draft, the commitment in writing, and the feedback you receive, this is when things really take off. And find help. Ask for help. This is a complicated grant. Find people who will support your application process. Meet with me, but not only me. I'm only one voice in this process. Find someone in your discipline to guide your research and content. Find someone to give you feedback on your image choices. Get a professor on board before the end of the semester. Maybe you can send them a draft or two this summer. Reach out to the RISD Center for Arts and Language. They are an excellent resource for brainstorming or fine-tuning your proposal. Talk to RISD Global about where RISD might have connections in your host country. A word on getting advice for help is get that advice early on in the process rather than so much at the end. At the beginning, all voices are important. At the end, your voice is important. Last-minute advice is dangerous as it can really throw you off. Everyone will see something different. Well-intentioned advice can send you down a rabbit hole after months of hard work, and it is really hard to recover from that. And one more resource for you. On the RISD Fulbright page, scroll down to Tips from a RISD Fulbrighter. Click on Learn More. You will find a document full of excellent insights and tips from RISD Fulbrighter to Brazil, Gail Foreman. I want to leave you with a reminder of the first deadlines. Schedule your Kickstart meeting to take place by mid-May. You can make an appointment with me on the Career Center website. At some point, depending on the applicant pool, I am only open to appointments for those applying this year. But RISD Career Center advisors Jason and Scott will continue taking appointments for those interested in a future Fulbright application. First drafts are due early June. This is a draft, and there'll be many more. But it should be a serious, thoughtful draft, not an outline, not bullets, and in the correct format and page numbers, and proofs for typos and grammar errors. You don't have to have all the answers for the first draft. Start pretending and imagining. But the more thoughtful your drafts are, the deeper I can go in my review to provide feedback that will help you take it to the next level. Be sure to check the checklist and deadlines on the RISD Fulbright webpage for the exact due dates. And finally, I want to emphasize what an amazing experience Fulbright is. Even the application process itself is a valuable experience, from the research to developing relationships overseas to writing to submitting. A Fulbright proposal is a lot of work, maybe the most intense proposal you will ever write. And a Fulbright application, after a Fulbright application, other grants will seem easy. And know that it will not be a waste of time. I look forward to working with you. Thank you, everyone, and be safe.
We are back. We're back live, everyone. We're getting Alex is still awake, and Alan's here, Gail's here. Great. Okay. Just a few quick Fulbright updates, and then I'm going to turn it over to Gail first, who won the coin toss. We have some exciting news. We have 13 RISD Fulbright semifinalists this year, and they are now waiting to hear from their host countries. So it's kind of a very exciting time. The Fulbright cycle will open, as I said, April 1st. So just make note, because at that time there might be some changes to the country pages. If you've been looking at the country pages, you're going to want to go back in April and poke around again. And third, we do have some tentative dates for the deadlines if you want to apply through RISD. So as of today, March 3rd, the first deadline will be May 26th. And that's the Kickstart intent to apply meeting with me. And then first drafts would be due June 12th. So do check again back in April, the Fulbright website and our website to see what's happening. So,
are you seeing something blurry?
Yeah, seeing something blurry, sorry.
Okay, perfect. So I am gonna do, and let me just see one thing. If I can see, did that went away? Or are you still seeing the whole slideshow?
Yeah, so now it's the
you know, okay. I was trying to see if I could have my notes in all the place, but that's fine. Okay, so hello everyone. My name is Gail Foreman. I think Lisa already said this, but just to give you a quick introduction, I graduated in 2014 with my BFA from the Glass department. And I wanted to start with this video, brief introduction of me, but just contextualizing my work a little bit. I work in glass, and I'm really interested in other materials, and just kind of before we sort of dive into like the experience of applying for the Fulbright, I feel like this video really describes sort of the way that I approached the application, the way that I approached work. I'm really interested in finding spaces of sort of like malleability, the wiggle, and this happened to be a video installation that I found while I was in Brazil that I loved. So it's nice to be here, and hopefully, you know, I can share my experience and, you know, perhaps answer some questions about what you're going through and what you're thinking about. So I am just going to start with sort of like the seed of the idea for just to give a sense. I actually tried to start a Fulbright application in 2013 before my senior year at RISD. Not actually for Brazil, where I ended up going, but for a different place. And it just didn't end up really going anywhere after a few meetings, because I just didn't have like an anchor that I felt like I could really build an entire proposal from. And so I just wanted to start. This image is from an interview from an online magazine that I found. in late 2016, early 2017, when I started to kind of restart the process of deciding, okay, I think I want to apply for a Fulbright. I'm going to do some research. And I happened upon this article through looking at some artists that I had liked in undergrad, and sort of like digging back into, just the internet and seeing what I could find about different artists that I was interested in, areas of the world that they were based in, just sort of anything that I could was really trying to cast a wide net. And I happened upon this article. The Campana brothers are designers, and Vic Muniz is mainly an artist, both from Brazil. And this interview was a conversation with all three of them. And in it, they talked about this sort of really uniquely Brazilian concept, this sort of word that ended up really anchoring my entire project proposal, that I was able to sort of combine my interests in material and actually working with, I'll skip to the next slide, but working with the designer studio and some other institutions. But just to give you a sense of like, sort of the inspiration can strike from many different places. And so when we're thinking about the application, this is just, I want to show this because this is my entire Fulbright folder of like documents and drafts and brainstorms. And we're not really talking about this, but I will encourage that if you can keep even your drafts and inspiration organized, it's really helpful. Even in years past, now I'm a few years out from doing the Fulbright, but all of the writing that I did for that and just the gathering of my ideas, I often refer back to that organization for projects I'm thinking about now. So I thought it was a relatively good visual aid to kind of show that, starting organized from the start is really helpful. But yeah, in terms of sort of what I sort of pulled out as the big major things that I could sort of speak to about the application process. So I sort of gave you a little sense of timeline that I started years before, kind of halted, restarted, and I really, started researching end of 2016, early 2017, so that I could really kind of like ease into my thought process and try to kind of like, cast as wide of a net as possible in terms of areas of the world, interests that I had. And then once I really had a start, like a sort of anchor point, that ended up being sort of the Campana Brothers studio and the sort of like relationship of materials and reuse that I sort of felt like I found in Brazil, then starting the statements kind of happened in tandem with what I'll talk about a little bit more as sort of finding the affiliation. So I want to mention that I had no previous experience or relationship with Brazil. I hadn't ever been there before. I didn't have any sort of, professors or friends or colleagues or family. And so it was really starting from scratch in the sense of really looking to every possible resource I could think of, any possible connection. And so once I had identified that I wanted to be researching this sort of concept of sort of reuse and material exploration alongside attempting to kind of work with these designers and the nonprofit program that they sort of run, I sort of came from both angles. I started searching other institutions that I could maybe work with, mainly focusing on universities, and really honestly kind of cold emailing folks and trying to kind of present as short of a little intro paragraph as I could to give a brief overview of, please email me back and we can talk more, but here's just a really introduction of what I'm hoping to maybe work with you on, up to then including sort of thinking of everyone that I knew that had a connection to these artists and designers. And I was able to make connections through like a friend of mine from RISD who had a relationship with a gallery in the U.S. who also represented the artists, who got me in touch with their friends. So just sort of an encouraging note of like also being expansive about, how you can get in touch with people, even despite, like it can feel like there are many like degrees of separation away from you. But slowly, with a little bit of time and a little bit of sort of kind of being open to sort of thinking about all the ways you might be connected, can usually find some sort of way to have, get that door open. The next thing I will also talk about, in Brazil, there is a language requirement. And so I just wanted to touch on that as an experience that sort of I had in that process. The language requirement is, well, it was, I'm not sure if it's changed, but it was either applying with sort of an advanced proficiency of Spanish or an intermediate proficiency with Portuguese. And at the time I sort of discovered the concept and really like started building that out. I had not started learning Portuguese at all. And so that was one of my, I think, greatest challenges in the application process. And I will say sort of just, I think making a decision in the beginning, trying to really decide, is this realistic? But then also once, I made the decision of, okay, this is a little bit of a stretch, but I'm going to really try to go for it. Again, I sort of was really open and trying to be expansive about the city I lived in at the time, contacting the universities that were there to see what sorts of language programs they had, looking online, contacting old Spanish professors from college to see if they knew anyone that was maybe a Portuguese professor that could maybe tutor me. So I really searched for sort of all of the resources that I could figure out, and was able to get, a tutor both in the city that I was living in at the time, and also through some connections to the university there, I was able to get into a class in a regional university that was online. And so all of these things really helped build up. At the very least, I could talk about the framework and the plan that I had to be prepared upon arrival in Brazil. So I think that's, I think within reasonable parameters, don't be afraid of the language requirement, but I think, assessing where you are at the beginning and trying to make a sort of decision of, okay, I think this is manageable to start tackling learning something new or improving something versus, maybe thinking that another place might be a better choice. And then the final thing that I'm mentioning on this slide is just the choosing of visual materials. I really tried to balance, I have a practice that sort of spreads between design, craft, and sort of fine art. And so I really tried to choose a selection that I thought would speak to both like a background in sort of sculpture and fine art, and also my desire to integrate design into my practice. And now I'm just going to kind of go through working with my affiliations. So this is a number of slides and video of working with the studio, the Campana Brothers nonprofit that really does a lot of interesting projects working with communities to sort of take materials and turn them into sort of new design objects or simply creative exercises. And so this affiliation was interesting because I also was able to design some workshops that I was able to sort of propose and do throughout the stay of the 9 months with them. But the affiliation was interesting because it was sort of unclear how much time I would end up spending with that studio. And so when I got there, it ended up taking up a lot less of my time than I thought it would. And so my other affiliation that I had planned, this picture on the right, was the University of Sao Paulo with the architecture department. And, I was really mainly there just sort of taking classes and trying to sort of learn about the context and the history of Brazilian design and sort of like urban studies. But when I arrived, I, connected with my two affiliates, and I ended up just, not having as full of a schedule as I anticipated, frankly. And I felt a little lost. I got some really great advice from a friend who sort of mentioned like, well, you're an artist, you're a designer, research for you might look like having a studio practice. And so then I sort of started looking into ways I might be able to connect with artist spaces while I was there. So the image on the left is a program called Pivot, which was an artist residency program that I ended up being able to participate in. The next image are sort of stills of the studio space I had at Pivot, and then the studio space I ended up having at the second residency I was able to sort of participate in after the first one. And these were really important shifts for me when I was there, because although I went into the project anticipating that I would be there mostly just learning and sort of being on the sidelines of these institution organizations processes and participating in the workshops, and me having a studio practice ended up being really important, where I was able to kind of take some of the ideas that I was seeing and really like put them into actual concrete experiments of materials and sort of playing with different objects and installations. And it resulted in a really interesting and fruitful sort of like deep dive into these sort of architectural construction elements. These are sort of bricks that I ended up casting out of all kinds of materials, foam and rubber and concrete. And, you know, without going too deeply into like an artist talk on all of that work, it just ended up being one of the most surprising elements of my time there, but also one of the most fruitful and sort of like, it also provided a community. Both of the artist residencies were full of other artists, mainly Brazilian artists. So I incredibly increased my ability to speak Portuguese, which was a huge thing. And also, you know, I made friends through those programs, which was proving a little harder in the classes in the university and things like that. And so these are just some slides kind of showing that experience of really like an unexpected twist, but it really ended up being such an incredible shift to sort of gain that community and really be able to talk to people about like my ideas and how that related to their research and sort of like their experience in what I was researching. And then the last thing I'll end on is just, you know, Lisa asked us to talk about just like what life was like. And so I'll add with my sort of second most important project, which is pictures of snacks in front of things. And just sort of say that my whole experience there, I felt like I was sort of like able to experience it with all of my senses and sights and sounds and tastes. And you know, I'm really glad that I sort of like pushed through the bits about the application process and the bits about even arriving there and feeling a little clueless to sort of be able to just end up in all of these kind of incredible, you know, 4x3 squares eating these great snacks. So I'll end on that and I'll turn it over to Alex. Let's see if I can.
Thank you, Gail. Gail, I love that. I love that snacks in front of things. That's really great.
The important art project.
As you're talking, I'm just going back to working on you with the application and everything and thinking about things. It's fun to think about again. So I have some questions too that I kind of wrote. So, but I'll wait. I'll let Alex talk first. I'm sure. And so if we don't have a lot of questions, I have some things that I want to ask about what your experience is like. So, all right. So go ahead.
Again, my name is Alex. I graduated from architecture in 2011, and I did also a concentration in history of art and visual culture at RISD. So that was kind of intertwined a little bit with my whole grant and sort of my angle of approach. So going back all the way to the beginning, like what was driving me to apply? I applied as an alumni a few years out. I started thinking about applying when I was a student, my final year. And then I graduated, sort of worked a little bit and realized I didn't want to be in an office, an architecture office. So I used the Fulbright as a way to explore a new creative direction, which then was sort of built upon what I had studied at RISD. So it was in many ways something completely new, but like, you know, Lisa and everyone at RISD really helped me figure out like how to show, like, even though this wasn't something I had done before specifically, how what I had studied at RISD really prepared me for it potentially. I also, like, I did EHP when I was at RISD, and that really just completely opened my mind to wanting to travel. So of course I was like, okay, Fulbright, I really want to do that. I had also had an internship in Switzerland right after graduation. When I graduated, it was not a great time for the economy. So I applied for things all over the world and basically got this one internship in Switzerland and nothing else, which is kind of random. But that also helped me push, like, start to think more in sort of a, you know, wanting to, like, enjoying living abroad and wanting more international experience and how important that was. And then I knew that I eventually wanted to do an MFA or a Master's of Architecture, just some sort of graduate degree. And I especially, so my project was looking at stage design for opera and theater, and film a little bit too, I kind of discovered. So looking at really cross-cultural and cross-disciplinary approaches to opera, both as a historical art form and what's being done today, like how it brings together artists of different backgrounds. Like you have, you know, set designers who are kind of like architects, you have costume designers, which oftentimes come from sort of an apparel background. You have lighting designers, obviously singers, composers writing music, directors who can't do all like specifically too much, but they bring everyone together then with an idea. So I was really interested in this collaboration part of opera, and how these artists come from all different cultural backgrounds. So I knew I wanted to study, I was really interested in studying stage design, but not having really done it before, I didn't want to just jump right into a graduate program without kind of exploring it a little bit more. So I used Fulbright as a way to do that. So for affiliates, but I guess maybe before I jump into that, I can talk about, I had a little bit of German from my internship in Switzerland, like really base level. So I knew, okay, I thought my angle could be like a German speaking country. I looked at different requirements. At the time, I don't know what it is now, but like Germany itself required a pretty strong language component, like a certain level, which I wasn't at, but I could kind of work toward it. But Switzerland and Austria both had relatively sort of more middle range. So I knew that I would need to push my language component. So that was something during the process of applying. I started taking like sort of private lessons and stuff and tried to take a class. I was living in New York at the time. So I just found someone who spoke German, and just started taking weekly lessons with them. And that was really something I think that pushed my application, was showing that I was really working on the language component, even though I definitely wasn't fluent when I was applying. So for affiliates, this is definitely the hardest part, and everyone so far has said obviously really helpful things. Another thing I just want to add is also, when you write to people, you can say that you don't need their monetary support. You're not looking for money. You're applying for a grant where you'll be covered, and that, people really run away from, like, if you're asking them for money. So that I think really helped me a lot. And I sort of started some letters to people with saying, like, I'm really interested in your institution and whatever, blah, 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 and your work. I don't need your financial support. I'm working on this project, which I'll get funding for. So because I had the sort of art history side and sort of contemporary design performance approach, I looked at the Vienna Theater Museum, which has an amazing collection of all sorts of historical theater documents going back like at least about 400 or 500 years. And I just randomly wrote to one of the curators, and luckily he wrote back and was really helpful and really nice. So that was like a big jump. I want to show some things in my collection that I discovered once I was there. These are just fantasy costume drawings from a Baroque artist in the 1600s. I think they could be like avant-garde turn of the century. So this is just sort of like this kind of thing with some of the surprises that I found when I was there that were really cool. And this curator, who my affiliate, just sort of basically eventually gave me a key to the collection, said, just let me know when you're here, but you can look at anything you want. And that was really, really amazing to develop that connection. They also had a couple of exhibitions, which I sort of helped, assisted with a little bit. Nothing too serious. I mean, it was mostly planned, and there's like a group of like full-time curators working on it, but they let me just sort of witness everything, be there to look at all the pieces. And some of what they were doing and what they discovered that I sort of witnessed and watched influenced my work a little bit again. So this is really the kind of historic side, looking at like how all these different artists from different cultural backgrounds come together. And I was looking specifically at Vienna because, in Austria, because it was this meeting point between like Eastern Europe and Western Europe. Austria historically was a center of a larger empire. So there are people from like all over Europe sort of coming to Vienna. So there's a lot of that cross-cultural and cross-collaborative work like in the arts and performing arts. And today, Vienna is like a super huge music and opera city. So I knew there was also a big like sort of contemporary world going on. My second affiliate was a professor of stage design at a university there, kind of like RISD. It was the University of Applied Arts in Vienna. These are some pictures of some of the buildings, but it was really cool. It felt a bit like RISD in terms of like they're all different artistic disciplines. It was an arts university altogether. And this affiliate also, I wrote to him, and he replied and said, yeah, come be a guest student in our program. Similar to Gail's experience a little bit. Like I was just kind of taking classes, anything that interests me. As a guest student, I could kind of just come and go when I wanted. I was kind of earning credit, but I wasn't specifically putting it towards a degree, because because I knew that I probably wanted to go back to the US. The program was technically in German, but most people spoke English, and my German at this point, like after a few months of being there, was sort of, at least I could understand 50 to 60%. So that was good, but they kind of worked with me, and I knew if I wanted to a full grad program, it'd be good to go to do it fully in English. There were all kinds of things. These are just some of the examples. Like we had a guest artist come in and do like a performance workshop with us. She gave us like flour, water, and rice and said, create something as a group. So this is just some of the, they just threw us all together. And this was really, really, really cool. If you can't make out, I'm the one, somehow I ended up like without a shirt and sort of pizza dough all over me. Just you kind of ask yourself, like, how did I get to this point in my life? Like, never would have thought I'd be in a public square in Vienna with pizza dough on me. But it was a really, it really kind of, especially coming from architecture and working in an office, like it just sort of felt, I was getting back to this really kind of free atmosphere and just like willing to kind of put myself out there and do anything, which I felt at RISD. And then when I started kind of working, kind of, lost it a little bit. So it was great to on the Fulbright to really kind of rediscover that side. These are just some models kind of combining some of the skills that I had done in architecture, but then thinking about designing like stage designs or installation pieces. These were other things. I hadn't really studied, like costume design or apparel really before. So just thinking about that was kind of like another surprise to sort of design the clothes for theater and opera productions. And then, so what was it like? I was a combined grantee, which means I got sort of basically I officially got like a full Fulbright grant, but I was also an ETA English teaching assistant for about 2 days a week. It was kind of like a few hours here and there. It wasn't a huge commitment. But when I was applying and I looked at different countries, Austria had this sort of combined grantee thing. And I think this was with the statistics. I think it was something like they offered at the time, I don't know, 5 or 6 full, completely grants without the English teaching. And then I think 10 to 15 like full grants, but with an English teaching component. And I eventually realized that this was a great way that I could add more community engagement to my application. So I talked about like if it was possible to be placed in an arts school. And they did, like when they were figuring out the placements for English teaching assistants, they put me in this school where there was a huge like component of like design and stuff. So I was actually assisting teaching English, but really working with students who were sort of arts and design students, like 15 to 17, 18-year-old, kind of like high school. So that was a cool point. I mean, they even had visits to museums as a class that I kind of joined them on. They helped me a little bit with my German. Like I was supposed to teach them English, but that was sort of like a fun way of sort of engaging with them. So that was, at first I thought, okay, I don't really want to teach English, but then I realized it was a good angle to add to my application, because community engagement and sort of cross mutual understanding is really an important thing to bring up in your application again and again. But Fulbright Austria as a group, when we got there, hosted us for like lots of different events. There were people, I was one of, I think, 3 or 4 like more arts-based grants, but most people were doing like science and research or writing or other history like grants. So we were mixed together, and we had like a really good, once a month they had some sort of public event that they invited us all to go to. On the left was my first ball. Vienna is like famous for ball culture, so I never really, when I was applying, thought about going to something that felt kind of stuffy, like a ball where you dance a waltz. But it was actually a university ball, so it was kind of, it looks formal in the picture, but it was really kind of pretty fun and pretty amazing. And it was an aspect of Viennese culture that was cool that I didn't necessarily think about. The Fulbright Austria group, like once I got there, they also, the office, they're within a museum complex, so they also had a space that they could rent out. So me and another arts student on an arts Fulbright basically got together and did a sort of like combined mini exhibition. I mean, it was sort of up for like a day and a half, but it was a really cool way. We invited all the people we had met the whole year. Like I invited students from when I was teaching English, so that it was really cool. They could see what else I was doing while I was here. And yeah, it was cool to have a little sort of exhibition as something, again, that I wasn't necessarily thinking about at first when I got there. So what happened after? So I wrote in the application that I wanted to apply to different master's programs. And I specifically wrote that I was interested in Yale School of Drama for set design and a couple other schools. It was funny to then come back from the Fulbright experience and coming off of RISD and then go to this like, buttoned up kind of Yale thing. But it was cool. It was also artists got together. I was, with my experience from the Fulbright, I was then able to like bring it into other parts of Yale that other students in my program like didn't have the experience with. So for example, on the right, that was the Yale opera students. We did like a collaboration with them. There were other, like we had a scenic painting class. So on the left, that was like looking at some of the imagery I had actually learned and seen in the theater museum in Vienna, kind of doing painting studies with it. On the right was again a musical performance that someone asked me to do because I had more sort of to design, because I had some more experience doing that coming off of the Fulbright. And if you heard from the beginning, I'm actually in Vienna now. So it really impacted my life in many ways because I'm back and I live here now. I originally wasn't expecting to live here permanently, but after I finished my master's at Yale, I really wanted to come back. And yeah, this is a piece that I did last year with a friend here in Munich. This was sort of my first like more larger actual stage and costume design. So yeah, and I think there's so much, but I'm sure we'll get a lot in the Q&A, so I don't want to go on. I think I'm about at the time limit. So I'll do stop sharing. Great.
Thank you. I don't know if I'm just hungry but now the pizza dough in the square, and then we got snacks in front of things. So excellent. Before we go to the Q&A, I was just wondering if I could ask each of you to respond to, we can see in your projects lots of opportunity for exchange in the community, and we can see your project outcomes that you did all the things that you did. But many applicants ask, what did you propose? Like, you didn't know all this great stuff was going to happen. You didn't know, and you're just guessing. Do you recall like what you proposed would be, like what you're giving back? Like, this is an exchange program, so you're going to learn, but do you recall what you said you were going to give back, and what would be the sort of the exchange element of that? Gail, we'll start with you since you won or lost the Twain Cost.
Sure. So, I was just like pulling up because, have showed you that I keep everything in all the folders, but I really talked a little bit about, and I didn't really go too deep into this when I was kind of giving my conversation, but I really talked about in between graduating from RISD and doing the Fulbright, and also part of my whole sort of, when I was at RISD, I was on the programming board. I was always really interested in sort of like programming events and putting together activities and things like that. After graduating, I went on to work at a few different glass studios, teaching classes and working with students and sort of getting folks to sort of interact with glass, maybe for the first time, or maybe to like really build skills. So I talked a lot about sort of coming from a place of being playful and curious about materials that, perhaps given my sort of perspective of glass, which is not a material that was widely used there, that perhaps in building relationships and workshops that I can sort of offer that as a lens. And so in building some of these creative workshops and things like that, that sort of my perspective of that particular material that I could sort of introduce, or at least lend sort of what I knew about that material. And that didn't end up really coming to fruition, but the workshops did, and the workshops working with transparent materials and with heat and with temperature, which is, I didn't go into that, but the workshops that I designed were using plastic bags and ironing techniques to sort of create a different material. So I really tried to focus in on that as my sort of strongest anchor point as to sort of how I would build connection with what I could bring to the table.
And you had some proof that, I mean, you've done things like this, so it wasn't like this weird stretch or something too grand or something.
Yeah, I could speak to sort of the experience, and then I guess sort of my other application materials, my resume supported that I had taught a variety of different workshops and classes, and from high school classes that I developed the curriculum to workshops that I just sort of came in and presented material that everyone used. So yeah.
Cool. Alex?
Yeah, I wanted to, I was in my application, I was talking about sort of uniting or looking at stage design and sort of opera practices in the US and Europe, and kind of uniting that a little bit and bringing the experience. And that was part of also why, like in my application, I wrote that I was interested in going to grad school after the Fulbright to kind of get that experience abroad and then bring that knowledge back to the US. And yeah, and then I think with the teaching combined grant, I talked about how, like, in the future, I'm interested in teaching as well. And so having this in the grant would sort of be helpful. And I could sort of, bring my experiences to the students there, and then, maybe learn from them and come back to the US if I were to teach, and sort of use that as a way to learn about teaching as well. And then I think, I did write about possible like outcomes in terms of like putting together little booklets, or keeping a blog at least that people could follow about, not just about my experience as a Fulbrighter, but about like what I was researching and finding, and sort of putting things together that I could then write and use and sort of put out there into the world to talk about what I had learned for more of like an American audience.
Well, and the beauty of both of your projects is that there was just so much natural community engagement in there, in everything that you were doing. In the Fulbright application, they actually have a specific question that's called community engagement, which can be more for the applicants that are more in the sciences and they might be working in the lab. And so Fulbright wants to hear how you're going to get out. But your projects from beginning to end, your whole daily life was with people and meeting different people. So which artists often have that sort of community, that natural community engagement piece, but it is really important. And we can see it obviously as you're talking about your projects now, but I think a lot of people always are wondering, like, but what did you put in the proposal to get there? Mm-hmm. Thank you.
So should we hit the questions that are in the Q&A?
Yeah, and I think some of them I can see them too. I can probably just bust out some of those process ones, and then we can talk a little bit more to Gail and Alex too. So sure. Yeah, shoot.
Yeah, and so I'm going to say the questions that are in the Q&A right now are quite logistical. They're like right to the process, which we totally get and respect. All those questions are necessary. And I'm just going to remind everybody, we've got Gail here, we've got Alex here, and we've got a moment with a couple of people that have been through it. So if you've got something very specific that, that experience would answer a little bit better than folks that are kind of on part of the process, now's a great time for that. So we'll start with Eli. So what does the early May deadline entail? Is it simply a declaration of intent, or did I miss some crucial detail with that? And that's, they say. Yeah,
it's called like the Kickstart. We just want to make sure you're ready. So basically you want to have your country chosen by then, a basic project idea, at least you kind of know what you want to be focusing on, and some affiliation ideas. And then we meet to just make sure you know what you're doing, I know what I'm doing, and we're ready to go. So it really literally is like your intent, and you're kickstarting it, and you're sort of ready to go from here. And I would say too, and I can actually kind of throw this back to Gail and Alex, a question we often get asked when sometimes we'll say, oh, it took people 1 to 2 years to pull this together. And a lot of people ask, what takes so long? Why does it take so long to do a Fulbright? So maybe each of you could answer that, of what are you doing between May and the submittal? Gail?
Well, some of it is writing drafts. I think I wrote and or revised probably between 8 to 10 versions of each of the statements, which sounds crazy, but it's true. Like you get a bunch of feedback in the beginning, everybody's giving you different opinions, you're sort of synthesizing. Sorry, I don't know if you can hear a chaos of dogs in the back. The other thing is, honestly, waiting for people to get back to you takes some time. So, you know, in between all the moments of refining your ideas and maybe, you know, ferociously attempting to learn a language or, you know, whatever you're sort of trying to do in that time, it takes a long time for people to get back to you sometimes. Sometimes folks are really quick to respond and then the next response takes a lag, or, you know, there's just, it took months to sort of go back and forth with both affiliates before we got to the point of, okay, here's the letter that you need for the actual nuts and bolts of the application. So that's, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, definitely. I think with the affiliates, it takes a long time, and just don't get discouraged if you don't hear back from people. I mean, I sort of went right to those 2 affiliates that I had, but I think I definitely emailed at least 20 people, probably 30 or something, and I would say half just didn't even reply. And it was really kind of letting, like, in that time, really finding who responds, and that kind of will lead your project a little bit. Like for mine, when I had that museum curator write back and say, yeah, great, come work with us, I was like, okay, good. So at least like can really push that side of the proposal. Like I know I can have that kind of art historical angle and then say I've done it at RISD. And so yeah. And yeah, definitely, just as Gail said, rewriting, editing, having people, you know, figure out your run-on sentences and how to fix those. Definitely. So yeah. So
it would probably be fair to say that it's not that you're working on this, you know, 12 hours a day for it comes in spits and spurts, but it's a slow process.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
All right, Ellen.
Did I get back in there? Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Thank you. So somebody who is noted as Dee Dee. Hi, I graduated with a BFA in 2020. Would this year be my last chance to apply for a Fulbright through RISD? And are my chances to receive a Fulbright slimmer if I were to apply later years in my life? I feel I'm prepared to apply soon and would like to learn more about the language and things like that. Also, would it be possible to go to a country where I do not speak the language and working with a translator? So those are 2 questions, and they're appreciative of everybody's time and encouragement.
Thank you. Thanks. Yeah, I probably answered this one pretty quickly too. So we do, so Fulbright has and everything on Fulbright is like, it depends, and it's all a little bit gray, but they roughly say 7 years. Once you're past 7, they used to say 5. Now they're kind of saying 7 years, and they say that then you've been out too long and you're not in this sort of student world. They do have a scholar program. They're 2 separate programs, totally separate processes, very different. For people that have been out longer, it tends to be a lot of faculty that do these scholar programs, but there is that for later in life. But we at RISD have a 3 years out, just to partly for capacity, because we have to have control of our limited resources that we have here. But also we have found that there is sort of a sweet spot. I think once you've been out too long, you have been out a while, and Fulbright might see that as a disadvantage, but also you probably don't need RISD support as much, and you can apply on your own. So just keep in mind too, you do not have to apply through RISD. Anyone can apply at large. And we could still help you a little bit along the way if you didn't want to follow our timeline and do what RISD's kind of sort of process along the way. So just know you can apply at large. You can apply up to 7 years out. But if you want to apply through RISD, we are looking at that 3-year window. Gail, Alex, do you have anything about applying through RISD? Would you have done it again? Did you need those timelines along the way, those milestones?
Yeah, and can I add, like, how much Lisa and RISD support versus all the other support you had in your life? Was it like kind of an even 50-50 bucket, or like how did you find the support you received here versus what you were doing on your own outside?
I keep
Yeah,
answering them
Jenna.
first. You can go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, and, no, it's definitely the huge amount of support from RISD, and having those deadlines was really, really helpful. For me, I'm kind of, yeah, just write stuff down and then forget when it's due and then wait till the last minute. So no, that was really, really, and I think, yeah, so I think, and having that, and then also, I mean, other things I didn't even expect. I mean, I went to the writing center at RISD, and they were brought on board to help just edit the work. And then they had really helpful comments about the content of my proposal as well. I mean, even there was sort of like an interview with some faculty and someone from global programs and like, career services. So even having that kind of like interview where I had to sort of get up in front of people and propose it and explain it clearly was really helpful. And yeah, no, it's definitely, I think having the support from RISD was pretty crucial for at least for my personal experience applying and everything. So.
Yeah, and for me, I didn't actually touch on this, and Alexander, your talk made me think of it, that part of the reason I decided to apply when I did was sort of that pressure or encouragement of the timeline of, you have this amount of time once you're out of school to apply. And it had always been on my radar as something interesting. I wanted to travel. I wanted to try to actually, again, kind of use it as a catapult to try to figure out what I wanted to do next. If I wanted to pursue a degree in architecture, actually, to be honest, which I have since decided it's not perhaps the right thing. But it was a really helpful, like, okay, I have to apply this year. This is my last year to use the RISD Career Center. And so it actually helped me kind of push through some of those doubts of like, am I ready? Is this idea strong enough? And through the process, get to a place where the idea had enough sort of holding power to sort of be convincing enough for them to sort of say, okay, we'll support this person. So that was also helpful in that there was some of that, like, this is my last chance to do it. I wanted to try it with the support, and then it ended up, having that locked in system framework actually helped push through times where I might have been like, I'm not sure if I'm going to hear back. Maybe I'll just like stop working on these drafts because, who knows what would have happened. But I think it really helped kind of keep me accountable of like, you want to do this, like just sort of push through to the end.
But it isn't, I mean, this isn't homework and you don't have to do Fulbright. So I think it is kind of nice to have some pressure to make it actually happen and get out the door. There was two other things on that question, just to quickly answer. So we go by the application year. So 2022 minus 3 years would be 2019. And so I think the person had said the 2020, so you would have until 2023. So just to clarify that. And then there's another question about translation on that.
Lisa, is that this cycle? They have to start this May, or can they start next May?
So that person was 2020. They could apply this year or next year.
Okay, thank you.
Then there was a quick question on that about translation. And you have to be really careful with translation, because if you're proposing a project where you need a translator, you might not be as competitive because there are probably going to be people that have the language and they will not need translators. So, it's something to, we can talk about, see where you need it, why you need it, at what points you need it. But you do want to show that you have what it takes to do the project. And in a competition like this, you want that behind you.
Yeah,
Awesome.
can I just say, like, even if you don't have any language experience for the country that you want to go to, and that's sort of okay for the country, like, you just write in your application that you're taking class. I mean, if you are, don't lie, but like that you're taking classes, even if you have like a commute every day and you're doing Duolingo or something. I mean, just write about what you're trying to do to expand your language ability, even if it seems minor. It'll show initiative. So.
Awesome.
Yeah, really good point. I mean, I think countries that don't have a language requirement, but the language is not English, you want to show that you are interested and that you appreciate, respect the language. So that is really important. And then there is a form in the application where you don't actually have to have the evaluation, but you can talk about, and Gail and Alex have talked about what they did in advance in this year before while you're applying.
I will say really quickly, I did the country, Brazil had the evaluations. I had to be evaluated by both someone that could evaluate my Spanish and my Portuguese because I was sort of applying saying I have more Spanish background than I do Portuguese. And even the evaluator, who was a person that had agreed to tutor me somewhat, kind of was acknowledging like, you really aren't at the level that you need to be, but you have taken all these steps that like, I am going to write this evaluation in support of like, saying that you do, because I know that you are, and so even honestly, people supporting you in that way of like seeing that like, if you were to go tomorrow, it might not be as fruitful, but you are taking all these steps that like are showing me as a language professor that I feel comfortable saying, that this person will be fine moving through
Awesome
that
to hear.
country. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, and language is like, I mean, the whole idea, if you could nutshell Fulbright, it's like that cross-cultural exchange, right? So that just begins with language and how you communicate, right? So is it okay if I dip back into the Q&A here? Cool. So hello, so this is Hannah Cheng asking, hello, I'm currently a junior in illustration and would love to start the application, but I was wondering if I could apply for an independent study / research, not fully in the arts category, but mainly science with the incorporation of art. If I apply through RISD. So if I were to apply for a science research project, would they have to be on their own?
No, I'm not an artist and I support all the artists. So no, that's fine. I mean, we'll support. So Fulbright has an academic track and an arts track. So you can apply even though you're an artist or at RISD under the academic track. The only thing is you're going to have to really consider really carefully who your competition is. So once you're applying under the academic track, you cannot submit an arts portfolio, so you will not be able to show your work. And you're going to be competing in that first round in the United States with other academics. So if you had a science-based project, but you have sort of this arts angle, they're not going to see your arts, then you're going to be competing with scientists. So it's a little bit tricky. Most end up applying in the arts and they do make it an art project, but they have some foundation, some support, some other side of what they're doing that is in the academic sort of sphere that they're interested in, but they are still making this in the arts in some way so that it's still an arts proposal. But happy to talk with you about like all the angles of that.
And Lisa, would it build a case if Hannah were to apply for a Maharam or something like that and do more science-based projects, or like through some of the nature lab things that are, or that are more science-based, if they had those things in their background?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think the biggest disadvantage to applying to the academic route is that you don't get to show your work. And so if you are having an angle of arts, but you're applying under the academic tracks, you don't get to show that off. So yeah, but yeah, I mean, then anything you can do. And then really, again, some countries will say that they prefer people with master's degrees. So if you were in one of those countries and you have a BFA, that could be a little bit tricky. So, but yeah, but never say no to anything. Got to see what you do and what you want to do and where it fits and what country and all those things.
Yeah, and really, I think see where your affiliates lead you when you start emailing. Like there was a girl with me in Austria, not from RISD, but we met in Austria on the Fulbright, and she had studied mathematics, but had sort of an arts angle. Like she had done art, like studio art on the side. She didn't go to a completely art school, and she applied with an art angle and a portfolio, and ended up finding an affiliate who was basically a mathematician, but taught at the same arts university that I was also at. So yeah, you might find an affiliate that's like a scientist that is also working as an artist, and that could be like the perfect sort of hitch.
Yeah, definitely. That's a perfect example.
Yeah. And Alex, you're inspiring me to remember. So Hannah, there's a lot of artist residency programs out there that will pair artists and scientists to work together on projects. So if you want to reach out to the Career Center, you can reach out to me, Alan Tracy. It's A Tracy at RISD. I can maybe steer you to some of those residencies to look at those, because yes, Fulbright, this is why we're here. That's a big big deal, but maybe this isn't so singular a thought, and you could go do artist residencies that would support this style of work. And that actually may lead you to having the kind of experience that they may recognize differently too. So it's another way to get that. So there are two last questions in the Q&A. So why don't I ask those quickly, and we'll start to wrap it up because it's approaching 8:30, if that's okay. So the quick one, I think, from Dee Dee is, can you apply to a Fulbright as an artist duo?
No. That is one of, that's actually, I mean, most answers are, it depends, but that is one that is no. And just quickly, we'll say too, another question that's often asked is, can I do a multi-country award? And the only options are Turkey, Greece, or Greece, Bulgaria, and then the European Union. And those are the only multi-country, and it is individual, no teams.
Thank you. And so to Gail and Alex, you have backgrounds working full-time, going back to school, doing research, having experience such as the Fulbright. How do you navigate where to move next in your career? So this person, Dee Dee, is currently questioning their career, choosing between financial stability of this job, and wanting to find something more fulfilling. You know, there's a lot that goes with that kind of change, the uncertainty of that. So can you both speak about that?
Sure.
Alex?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, I really use the Fulbright as a way to explore something new. I had been working in an architecture office, and what I love the people I worked with, but the work was, I didn't want to sit in front of a computer for 10, 12 hours a day. So yeah, and so I knew if I'd applied for a Fulbright, it would be a year of at least financial stability. I could really, if I really used the time well, I could build up skills, and then essentially after that, be ready to work as a stage designer, or kind of at least in the field. So yeah, that was, sorry, it's almost 2:30 for me, so I'm kind of like losing what I'm saying. But yeah, no, so yeah, I think that was about, yeah, my sort of answer.
Well, and one thing really did lead to the other with you. Like,
yeah.
Really, yeah, it really,
yeah, exactly.
really kickstarted a lot of things.
Yeah, because when I came back, I mean, as I said, I did put in an application. I wanted to go to grad school after the Fulbright. But then when I looked at grad schools, and specifically when I went to the Yale School of Drama, they were like really enthusiastic about having the Fulbright experience and what I would bring to the program. So it was almost like then coming back to the US, the same idea of cross-cultural stuff, you know, learning from each other, mutual understanding.
And I'll kind of echo, I use the Fulbright in the same way of, yeah, really wanting to push myself into a different realm. I sort of mentioned like maybe thinking, do I want to go to architecture school? Am I interested in moving sort of more in this design world, and trying to put myself in the environment that I would be in that way, as opposed to sort of the fine arts nonprofit spaces that I had been in up until that point. So I definitely used it as that. And I think what you say about like knowing that it is a year of financial stability. And I will say it was the first time since school, and honestly, like in school, you know, you're also doing a million things and working all kinds of jobs and whatever you're doing. So it was the first time I had really ever had financial support to just sort of like follow my interests. And that has been really impactful. And I'm honestly, to be totally frank, I'm still sort of parsing through what that means for like my actual sort of what I really want to be moving forward. But it really gave me the opportunity to have such an amount of time to do that. And then I ended up sort of coming back, folding back into a more financially stable arts nonprofit career, but it also had just been able to get me out of where I had been. And so then I could go to any city and sort of look at jobs that I might not have looked at, even just being in the same field, but I just maybe wouldn't have like been ready to move or anything like that. So I will say that even though I've sort of gone in that path of like full-time job to Fulbright back to a full-time job, that sort of just year of sort of stability helped me sort of explore some of those things, to also a place that I asked different questions of my current job than I did of the one that I had before the Fulbright. And I think that's based on sort of the experience of like having that time and support. So, you know.
Yeah, definitely. And like learning to navigate another country and then with another language, you kind of come back and you feel much more confident. Like someone on my Fulbright year just said, never say no, never say never to anything, which is obviously simple and whatever. But when I kind of thought about that, it said, okay, you know, there's a film screening, I'll just go. And then I happened to meet someone that wasn't even interested in the film, but then we had some connection, and then, you know, or maybe I have the free Saturday, like I'm not going to sit in the apartment, I'm just going to go take the train to the end of the line and see what's there, you know. So I think that sort of part of exploring and exploration really happened, like pushed on my Fulbright. And then when I came back, I just felt ready for anything.
That's awesome. I mean, it sounds transformative for sure. And, you know, I know we said we were going to end there. Lisa, I guess what I'm inclined to do is, because there are 4 more fairly logistical, like process oriented questions going on, I want to reshare the links in the chat for everybody for the resources that Lisa has provided and the places where a lot of these things get answered. Lisa, should we end there and have these folks that are questioning these things check out the information and then reach out?
I can do these questions super quick, and if Alex and Gail, if you want to bail, that is totally fine. But yeah, I can do these questions really quick.
Yeah, I can definitely stay a few more minutes.
Okay. Yeah, and maybe you have something, but yeah. So, do you want to read the question? Is that
sure? Yep. So post Fulbright, what does the documentation look like post Fulbright?
And I want to hear what Gail and Alex have to say to this, but I will say, from all of the applicants that I know of, it's very different country to country. Some countries have reports, some don't. Some have some kind of final show because they have more of a community there. Some countries don't really do anything. I think most people are a little disappointed. They want to do something with their stuff, and Fulbright's kind of like, you know, we want to have a great experience. But I'd like to hear what did Austria and what did Brazil want?
Brazil did want a few reports. And there was one final report that had a little bit of contingency with funding, sort of the final funding. But Brazil was a very independent. They pretty much, you know, set us loose. There was a week-long orientation of sort of like, if you need us, we're available via email, but it was very, very low contact hours in that way with any of the Fulbright folks in Brazil. So there wasn't really any final like sort of anything except for the sort of like very formal report where it was really low impact, like sort of just wanting to check that you in fact were like sort of doing what you said you were doing, or if not, like you were doing something. So that one was an experience that I wasn't expecting, but low commitment on that. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Similar to Austria too. We had the sort of monthly events just to get people together. But if you didn't they didn't take attendance. Some people we didn't really see. I mean, some people were on like the other side of the country and just didn't want to take the train for 5 hours to make strudel together or something. But yeah, we had sort of like almost like a science fair at the end where everyone just kind of set up a little booth and made a poster. And then we all just kind of walked around and saw what we had done. At that point, we were mixed with the scholars. So they were like, you know, mostly older people, like mostly professors and faculty from American schools and stuff. So we got to see what they had been researching too, which was kind of cool because we didn't really have a connection to them throughout the whole year. But yeah, they really, it was a little bit of a letdown at first. Like I thought, oh, I'm so ready to write a report and just show everyone what I had done. But it was more about sort of what I made with that energy once I got back to the US.
I think that speaks to, yes, you have to have a meaningful project and you have to have a plan and you have to go through this whole proposal and everything. But what Fulbright is really about is meaningful cross-cultural exchange, and the experience and what you put in it is what you're going to get out.
Awesome. So 2 more, okay. You all good?
They're
Good.
really good
Mhm.
questions,
Yeah.
so sticking
Super.
in.
Yeah.
Super. Thank you very much. So Hannah is asking, does Fulbright grant cover all the costs for residency, workshop classes taken or just partially? And what does the stipend truly cover? And what does the stipend truly cover your needs, or should you have a decent savings? Like, or is the stipend covering everything you need?
So how about I give the standard answer from Fulbright, and then you guys can tell what it was really like. So Fulbright gives you a monthly stipend, and it's different for every country depending on cost of living and currency and all of that there. What Fulbright says is that you're fine, that you are not making money, you're not, living, a high life, you're not profiting or anything like that. I think I heard them say, you're living like a graduate student. Of course, I don't know what that means, because when I lived like a graduate student, that wasn't that great. But I think you're covered. Sometimes you can live a little bit cheaper, and then you can save some money to take a class or do something. They do not give you money for your supplies. For a lot of extra, well, I shouldn't say that. Some countries might have a little bit of another pocket of money once you get there. Every country, again, is a little bit different. But basically your housing and you're comfortable. So that's the line that Fulbright gives. What was it like?
Well, I'll say a few things. The guidelines are interesting to read. Brazil specifically discourages folks from applying to major urban areas, like Sao Paulo, which is where I specifically applied to be. I think my hypothesis is part of that is the high cost of living. So I will caveat that, where like I intentionally entered into a scenario where I knew that the pocket of money that I had was going to have to work a little harder. I will say that I did sort of pre-save in terms of expenses. It covered everything I needed in Brazil. I did pre-save the amount of money I would need to cover my student loans for that year, because that was a pocket of money that I didn't really have a choice for, but also like that would have been a chunk out of that stipend and all these things. So that I did pre sort of plan for, which I'm sort of really glad that I did. And then the only other thing I'll say about that is that then Brazil had this interesting thing where they told us the amount of money and the stipend, all these things. And then at the end, they sort of said, well, I forget how much it was, but something like $1,000 or something was supposed to be used for in-country research-related travel. And if you didn't fill out a form that had proven that you had done some sort of in-country related travel, they wouldn't fulfill that full amount. So that was interesting. It wasn't extra money, but it did cause, an arts project, I was able to relate literally anything that I did. I was like, let me go to this really amazing architectural building in this one city, and there you go. But it did cause some folks a little bit of stress of like, I have nothing related to my research that I can travel for. It ended up being way more flexible than it seemed, and I don't think anyone like ended up missing out on that budgeted $1,000. But it was interesting. It was not extra pot of money, but it was something that ended up sort of you had to do a few extra pieces of paperwork once you were in the experience, which I had not realized.
Yeah, definitely. For I think the upfront costs, like, or just sort of moving costs and stuff, we were supposed to get like an extra $400 or $500, I think, to get settled the first month, and like that we ended up getting it reimbursed. So there was like a little bit of extra kind of money I had to spend for myself, like the first month or so. But then month to month, I think it definitely was enough. It wasn't, yeah, you couldn't like go off and, make big vacations every weekend to other countries and, go out every night and whatever. But it was comfortable month to month. I think if you have a project where you're really using expensive materials, like if I had gone, like I bought basic sort of model building supplies, chipboard, cardboard, paints and stuff, it wasn't too much. And so that just came out of my sort of monthly living budget. But I think if you were doing a project where you were buying like, gold wire and stone and lots of, or if you had to ship lots of things back and forth or something, or even if you were really buying like a lot of really expensive oil paints or something, you might sort of just make it, but you might have to watch, what you're spending and be frugal a bit. I think with that said too, there are some opportunities to, like, I don't know if you can't apply for other grants, but like there are some institutions that might offer a little help, like within the university I was in. If you were like a sort of a visiting student, they would like waive certain things, like, some facilities had maintenance fees that you had to pay or something, and like they kind of waived those for certain people. Like, so I think like some places you might be able to find money in certain places, but you have to go hunting.
Well, I think too, Fulbright will look for feasibility. So if you are proposing a project that they can see that it's going to be big murals and it's going to be really expensive to apply, that might not be the year to do this. You might want to think a little bit smaller this year and remember that this is about your experience and learning, and then you can come back and do some of that bigger work. So I've worked with applicants definitely that had sort of bigger, grander ideas of like supplies and materials and equipment, and then thought, I think this will just be more of my year to like explore and research and engage, participate, and then I'll do something more when I get home.
Yeah, and availability of materials is definitely something to consider too. I remember last year when we were chatting with some folks that had done the Fulbright, they were surprised when they got there and they couldn't get some things. They just couldn't get them at all.
Mm-hmm.
And that turned into a really expensive venture to like get them shipped from home and everything. So like researching like the availability might play into your budgeting thinking. So we're down to one last question, and people are really hanging in there, and thank you so much for being part of this. So Gail, Alex, but also the folks that are attending, thank you for sticking around for these questions. So last question. So tips on formulating project proposal, struggling to unify my interests into a single quantifiable goal, workshop, exchange experience. And forgive me, I'm not saying your name because I'm not sure how to pronounce it, and I don't want to do that to you. So Lisa, I'll serve that up to you as the last question.
Well, I will say you're going to hear so much from me throughout this process and through my emails and everything on tips and getting there, and one thing at a time, gaining and moving it forward. So, and looking at our website, enough of me. So I say, Gail and Alex, you should take this question and we can end on your answers for this question of how to get there.
I will say, I was in preparation for sort of doing this session. I looked at like sort of my first drafts, my old drafts, and I was realizing that I had used, I think it must be from the Fulbright website or maybe something that you send out, Lisa, the sort of who, what, where, when, why types of questions. So I will say that I think actually really helped me get a little bit more specific. So that sounds simple and silly, but just trying to answer the sort of most basic structural questions helped me kind of say, okay, like I can kind of focus in. And also I think finding or trying to like carve out one specific aspect of perhaps all the research that you've maybe already put in of the country. Like as soon as I found the sort of Portuguese word that I ended up building a lot of the proposal around, that helped me just keep referring back to. So whether you sort of discover it or whether as you're looking at sort of your like all of your scribbles of notes of ideas, trying to just make a decision on, okay, making one thing an anchor, and then just trying to be almost like clever about how to relate all of the other interests that you inevitably have back into that anchor, so that sort of it feels like it's all stemming from one thing. But that sort of who, what, when, where, why really helped me get to sort of like, okay, how can I make it about one thing that then I'm giving you hints of like, this is why that relates and this is why this other thing relates, all back to sort of that thing. So that helped me kind of try to connect the dots.
Awesome.
And I'll just tell you that that document on the RISD Fulbright page, it's in the Getting Started document. Not sure what page it's on, but it's like called Key Content or something like that. And there's like all these headers in green. So that's what Gail's referring to.
Yeah.
Yeah, and for my process, I just kept a journal sort of sketchbook for just Fulbright ideas and thinking, and like web diagrams were really helpful because, you know, I don't like to just write and then turn the page and write. Like I kind of scribble everything around and, you know, so I was just writing down, like I'd be sitting on the subway in New York or something and be like, oh, what if I, like I saw that article about Croatia, like what if I, like I was just writing everything that popped into my head, and it seemed all unrelated. But as I was able to kind of go back and look at things, I'd be like, oh, okay, I found this performance artist in Croatia, but actually what they're doing is kind of like this artist in Austria. And oh, Austria also has this institution that I want to go to. So, okay. So I think to kind of just get everything out there and then constantly kind of go back and check and look and see where things overlap is really, really helpful. Just keeping, and even just like cutting, pasting things out into this book and then having that as kind of like this document. And it seems all disconnected or not so interrelated, but it does kind of distill itself in a way. Because I think I was even at the very beginning, I was starting writing proposals for multiple topics and multiple countries. And then it just eventually one just started to feel right. So.
Like one thing kind of leads to the, and I really appreciate seeing both of your organization styles. I mean, just getting organized is part of the process and standing back. And you never know when it's all of a sudden, like you said, like on the train, all of a sudden things are like, that makes sense.
Yeah, so it's sort of a frustrating answer of like, at some point it will become clear. But I think that sort of maybe the advice is just like that generation of ideas, like it can feel like you're floundering because you haven't connected them, but just keep sort of generating them and writing them in different versions, and the web, yeah, anything that you can just kind of keep getting them out there, and yeah, slowly something starts to click.
So the answer really is just keep at it and let all these things come together and just keep going.
So I did share the getting started document that Lisa talked about in the chat, and I'm also resharing Gail and Alex's website, Instagram, things like that. So I think that's it on the Q&A.
Awesome. Yeah. So thank you. Well, thank you, Gail and Alex. Be in touch and let me know when you need anything. I'll send you an email tomorrow or something. But yeah, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Alan, for all your help pulling this together, and everyone for joining us. And yeah, good luck. We're here for support, and excellent.
Yeah.
Thanks, Lisa.
Good night, everybody. Thank you.
Good night.
Bye all.
Bye.